Okay, this is the goal setting webinar. Let's get cracking. So the thing is, there's this guy who's called the happiest person on the planet, and his name is Matthew Ricard. And I would recommend that you listen to him. But what you need to do is, Matthew has said that people, when they meditate, they reach a certain level of calm and they slip into meditation very quickly. So he talks about the beginner, and he says, you know, the beginner, the person who starts to meditate is very contrived, it's very difficult for him. He doesn't do it very well. Then he talks about the intermediate person, and well, they have some effort, they do it okay. And finally, he talks about the advanced person. And the advanced person does it perfectly without effort. And really, what we're talking about is this whole factor of slipping from a clumsy zone into a non-clumsy zone. Now, you might say, well, Matthew is just a monk. You know, he sits up in the Himalayas. He doesn't have the responsibilities that we do. So what we need to do is we understand that to get to a certain level of perfection or ability, we have to set goals and set them really well. But are we going to take the advice of a monk? Well, we go to the streets of Chicago, and in the streets of Chicago, you have a company like Uber. Now, there is a pay gap in Uber, which is really odd, because when you think about Uber, you don't think of it as some place where people could earn 5% more or 6% more. Yet, when they crunched the data at Uber, they found that they did about 740 million Uber trips, and they had about 1.8 million drivers. And from 2015 to 2017, they found that there is a pay gap of 7%. Now, the point is that the algorithm of Uber doesn't discriminate. And they looked at the users of Uber and go, maybe they discriminate. Maybe when they look at the photograph, they cancel out the trips. And they found that didn't work either. That doesn't happen. So what's really happening? And nothing seemed to make sense. But what was really happening? Where was the gap coming from? And they found it was learning by doing. They found that the Uber drivers that earned more, they knew where to go, they knew the streets better, they knew how fast to go, they knew how strategically to accept or cancel riders that are a bad match. And so what they're doing is they're actually making fewer mistakes. What we're looking at is this factor of unclumsy. Why do we do any goal setting in the first place? It's because with our goal setting, we're clumsy. We struggle, we are contrived, it's difficult. When we do some level of goal setting, that clumsiness goes out. And so that's what we're doing today. We're looking at goal setting, but we're also going to briefly look at implementing, because that's what people want to know. Goal setting, yes, I can do it. Implementing, how am I going to do that? So the housekeeping for today on this call, the call is about 45 to 50 minutes. Then you can be on video, as you can see some of us on video. There will be, you should be on mute. I can still hear some of you. So if you're not on mute, please put yourself on mute. And all the questions you can ask at the end. You can do this through chat, or we can go live. The slides and the recording you'll get at the end. And finally, the chat box. Most of you would have found the chat box. So that's the chat box is in the corner. Use the chat box. However, during the presentation, I won't be looking much at the chat box. So use the chat box more at the end. So let's get cracking. What's the agenda for today? The first thing we're going to cover is the fetch hog concept. The second thing is the rollout strategy. And the third is avoiding burnout. These are the three things that we will cover. Let's start out with the fetch hog concept. What is the fetch hog concept? Now, the fetch hog concept will again have three things. The first is understanding what it is. The second is we'll look at what's important in the fetch hog concept. And finally, we'll go to what if I'm wrong. So these are the three things we'll cover in the fetch hog concept. Now, first thing is understanding. There's a guy called Isaiah Berlin, and obviously I've got the spelling wrong. I can see that right away on the book cover and my stuff. But anyway, let's move ahead. And he came up with this concept that Jim Collins also mentions in Good to Great, which companies go from good to great. And the hedgehog, it seems, does one thing well. It's like a monk who trains for 50,000 hours and they become advanced. And then you have the fox, and the fox does so much. And he does so much that he misses out on a lot. And it becomes clumsy. So that's what the book was about. The book, or that little report kind of thing, was about how you have to be either a hedge or a fox. And technically, I don't agree with it. So if we merge the two of them together, what we get is a hedgehog. And a hedgehog doesn't do one thing and doesn't do many things, but does just three things. So 1, 2, 3. That's approximately what we do at Psychotactics. We do our presentations in threes. We do everything in threes. And it seems to work for us. How do we go about it? But the point is, what is important? How do we get to that? What we've looked at is the hedgehog concept, but what's the important thing? Now, let's look at, say, the goals for the year. When we start out the year, we have very loose goals. We don't know specifically what we're going to do. If you look at this, it has Instagram, stock cartoons, websites, small products, a whole bunch of things. So we just say, okay, let's choose Instagram, let's choose small products, and let's choose the talent book. And which one is important? Should we do stock cartoons? Should we do more courses? It's very hard to tell. So what we're going to do is we're randomly going to pick 3 things. And once we do that, we go, okay, let's look at the first thing, and that's the talent book. Now, we'll get to the point with what if I'm wrong, but I just want to walk you through how we go about it. We almost have a randomness to our picking, and that is because we want to figure out as we go along how we can make it more efficient. But let's say we chose the first book, which is the talent book. Now, the most important thing for you to look at is how much stuff there is. So what we do every time is we go, okay, we've got these goals, and we go, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 goals. But this is just one thing. This is just the book on talent. And to promote that book at some level, we'd have to do speaking, which might involve TED, which might involve getting in touch with TED organizers, which means which place would you go to? Would you speak in LA? Would you speak in Auckland? Where would you speak? What topic would you speak on? How would you go about it? This becomes a whole mission in itself. Maybe you need a website. Maybe you need an email list. Maybe you need to go to educators like teachers and parents and church and university and coaching associations. What you're starting to see is that what seems like just one point is now splitting up into all of these things. And this is just one sitting. This is just 1 hour at the cafe. This is like one of the things that we're headed on. What's very important or clear here is that when we pick that, we don't start on writing the book. We work out the strategy in advance. So everything is worked out in advance. So you think, well, how do you know that this is going to go to plan? We don't know. You never know how it's going to plan. And so what you do is you work out the strategy in advance, then you add to the strategy, then you subtract, then you multiply, do whatever you need to do. Let's take a second example. Say we looked at the talent book. Let's look at Instagram. Now, out of the blue, in November last year, I started posting some stuff on Instagram. So I thought, okay, let's see how Instagram works. Because in every business, you can have like blogs, you can have reports, you can have a whole bunch of things, but technology keeps moving ahead. And if you don't kind of keep abreast, then it could be difficult for you. But I do this from 2 points of view. One is my own, and the second is to advise clients when they ask questions. So we started on the Instagram journey, and that became our second project. Now, again, I've got 3 Instagram accounts, but that's besides the point. That's just me. But even if we were to take just one Instagram account, now this is about cartoons. These are cartoons that I post every day. And we have to have competitions, or maybe we have to have stuff like collage. Maybe we get the followers to submit their own sayings, submit their own ideas. They get a high-res version of it. We probably make books, we make postcards, we create products. All of this stuff, all of this planning is going before the Instagram account gets off the ground. So a lot of the planning is just, okay, we have this idea. Now let's come up with a strategy. What's the exact strategy? Nobody knows. We put the strategy down based on what we know, and then we fine-tune the strategy as we go. And when we go back in time to 5000 BC, you'll see that this weird system that we're using is not so weird after all. This is kind of what a lot of people do. This is a photograph from July the 1st, 2005. And what you'll notice is a whole bunch of stuff. And now, to give you a framework, 5000 BC was probably just a little over a year old, maybe a year and a half old. And so it has all of this: promotion, subscriber, customer contact, activities, goodies, resale, Cave Chronicles. And you straight away you think, oh, this is so tiring. This is so much work to be done. But this is how you get tired when you're the fox. So you're always looking at, how can I do 3 things? And then how can I do 3 of each thing? So supposing you look Instagram, I'm going to do 3 things in that, and then move on, and then move on. And what we're doing is we're always picking just 3 things for the year and working with those 3 things. So this takes us to the third part of the fetch out concept, which is, what if I'm wrong? Now, this is the question that everybody asks. What if I'm wrong? How do I know I'm going to be right? And there is this line, this phrase, that no battle plan survives contact with the enemy. Most people think, who could have come up with this? And this is my joke, of course. This is who came up with it: Santa Claus, right? I mean, think of Santa Claus. He's got this system in place. He's got reindeer. He's got one day to do the whole thing. And I don't know, maybe 10 snowstorms might show up. Maybe the North Pole will melt on that day. I don't know. But this is the whole point. You have to work out the strategy, knowing that on Christmas Day, Santa Claus is going to go out there and he's going to get all of his toys to the kids. So you have to make the strategy. Who knows what's going to go wrong? When you go to the supermarket, you don't know what's going to go wrong. You don't go, I won't go to the supermarket because who knows what's going to go wrong. You just go to the supermarket, you set a strategy, you come back with something. Now, to give credit where credit is due, this is the guy who came up with it. I can't say his name. I'm sure I'll goof it up, so I won't say his name for now, but I'll figure it out later when some of you will tell me how to say it. So that's it. He came up with it. No battle plan survives contact with the enemy. He looks much better than Santa Claus. So expect to be wrong. Every time, expect to be wrong. Think of your plan as going for a drive or going for a bicycle ride. Everything's going to change along the way. Your plan is set in place, but everything's going to change along the way. What's important is that you have a strategy in the first place, and that you're going to tweak that strategy as you go along. Because that's what driving is all about. It's always about starting out and then figuring out who's getting into my lane, who's getting out of my lane. That's how it all works. Going on a diet is the same thing. We start out, we say, okay, we have a plan for the diet. Then we run into spaghetti. Then we run into cakes. Then we run into coffee, and the diet is shot to hell. But when we have that strategy, what happens is that we don't exactly go off tangent. We stay partially on tangent. And that's what this whole goal setting thing is about. We're not trying to achieve 100% of everything. We're trying to achieve 50%. And when we get to that 50%, and we'll see how we get there, what we find is that we achieve so much more. Now, you look at other examples of companies that have the resources, companies have the knowledge. There's this phone, Amazon Fire. I'm sure most of you have never heard of it. And the reason why is it was a complete failure. Though Amazon has enormous amount of resources, didn't work. They offered it for 99 cents. People were still not willing to buy it. So they set up the strategy. What if I'm wrong? That's how Amazon works. And you think, well, Amazon is a big company that can afford to do all this stuff. No, they're no different from anybody else. They still have to report back to someone. They still have to talk to their shareholders and stuff like that. So all of us have to have this little bravado. That's what business is all about. If you don't have it, well, technically you might as well get a job. So always expect to be wrong, because here's what's happening. We're always looking at, this is how the plan is going to turn out, this wonderful castle. But really, this is where it starts out. It starts out in this tiny little, bumpy little castles, and then who knows, something will come and destroy your castle anyway. And so then you have to tweak it and tweak it and tweak it. And so the thing is that what we do at Psychotactics is we always expect to be wrong. And when we expect to be wrong, then we can make those tweaks as we go along. We work out a strategy in advance, just randomly pick something. Sometimes it's random, sometimes it's not random, but most of the time it's random. It's like, how can you tell that small products are a better concept? We can tell now. Like, for instance, we looked back at last year and 27% of our sales came from small products. But when we started small products, we didn't know that. For the longest time, the smallest product we had was the brain audit, which was $139. So we didn't know that. We had to go, okay, well, let's do some small products. Let's work it out. And then you tweak along the way. What is going to happen to the small products? Are they going to be $30? Are they going to be $40? Are they going to be $50? Are they going to be $10? And are we going to have a range of them? So this is the way you're working out strategy, because you don't know what's going to come ahead of you. So when we look at the plan of 5000 BC, that gives us some insight, because we can go back and say, this is what we had planned for 5000 BC in 2005. Google ads didn't happen. Affiliates didn't happen. Newspapers didn't happen. None of this stuff happened. Everything that you're seeing right now didn't happen. Then we went to other things like call clients, and some clients would be excited. I'd call them up and say, hello, this is Sean speaking, this is a surprise call. And some of them would chat for half an hour. And some of them would just go ballistic, as in they'd be so nervous and so scared. And so we had to stop the call clients because it was freaking people out, at least some of them. So we went to surprise gifts. Now this has stayed in place. This is how you get your chocolate. It goes all the way back to 2005, right? So this is the whole problem. The problem is that a plan, first of all, expands crazily, and then you don't know how it's going to work out, and you just have to tweak as you go along. And that is really the best strategy you can have. So this sounds really unobvious, sounds really strange. There should be a kind of paint by dots or whatever system, but this is the way it works. So we've just finished part one. In part one, we looked first, choose 3 big things. This is the start of the year. You choose 3 big things. That's your fetch hog. The second thing is, what's important? Wait, you didn't choose 3 big things from 3. You had 17 big things that you wanted to do. You chose 3 big things. How do you know it's going to work? You don't know. It's inexact. That's what it is. What you're going to do is you're going to be like the driver who gets on the road. You're going to figure out, this guy's cut in front of me. I have to hit my brakes. Now we have a free road. I can accelerate. That's just the way it is. So in this webinar, we're covering 3 things. The first was the fetch hog concept, which we've just finished. The second that we're going to cover is the rollout strategy. And this is what we do at Psychotactics every year. We start out usually in November, but sometimes in December or January, and we work out a strategy. How does the strategy work? Well, let me talk to you about it. But first, let's go to Italy in 1508. Now, this doesn't look like much because it looks like just another Italian building, but it's a Sistine Chapel. And in 1508, the Pope, Sixtus II, he decided that he wanted the Sistine Chapel to be painted. So he decided, okay, let's call a painter, and he decides to call Michelangelo. Now, there's a problem here. First of all, Michelangelo, he considers himself to be a sculptor. He's not a painter. Then they have to paint in fresco, which is a system or method of painting. He's never done that before. It's very difficult to learn. The ceiling is a curved ceiling. That's a problem. Italy has these winds called the tramontana, which comes from the north. It's very cold. It's mildew sets in. The salt comes out. There is a whole bunch of trouble. And then there's also the undoing the work. So it's not like he went into this chapel and, oh, let's paint on the surface. There was Pier Matteo de Amelia, and he had gone and done stuff. So the removal of the plaster had to be done. The work had to be chiseled. The walls had to be chiseled. The gaps had to be smoothened over. All the old plaster had to be taken away. New salt and lime had to be brought in. So there was a lot of this work that had to be done. And how does Michelangelo go about this task? He goes about it saying, okay, let's look at the entire space, which is 12,000 square feet. And then they start to build a scaffolding, 60 feet above the floor, 130 feet in length. And they go about it bit by bit. And really, when you're looking at how you're going to plan your stuff for the day, what you're looking at is scaffolding. So how do we roll out our strategy? We look at it from three aspects. The first is yearly, quarterly, and weekly. So when it comes to yearly, I've already told you how we do it. We just go about 3 goals, 1, 2, 3, and then we stop fishing. We don't go about, okay, let's do the 4th and 5th and 6th. Everything is benchmarked against those 3 goals. It's like, does this fit in with the small products? No. Does this fit in with Instagram? No. And some of them cross-reference. Some of the stuff that is in Instagram could probably go to small products. Some of it, which is in this side, might go to that side. But everything is benchmarked against, does it fit in with this or not? And that's how we go about the yearly plan. But then after that, we have to have what would be a quarterly plan. And the quarterly plan looks just like you would expect. We start on Jan 15th, because usually we're on vacation till Jan 15th. And so we go Jan to Feb, Feb to March, March to April. And this is an actual picture of what it looks like. We start with the end. So on April 10th, we're getting on a flight to Singapore because we're doing the workshop there. So we start out at the end, and then we go backwards from there. And it's just, you can see where this 3 stuff comes on. It's like from 15th of Jan to 30th of Jan, I'm only going to do 3 things. From 30th to the next one, I'm going to do 3 things. And often it might even be the same 3 things. So if you look at like copywriting course comes up, and then copywriting course comes up, and copywriting course comes up, talent equation, the book comes up. Of course, Instagram is not even here, because at that point we hadn't even thought about Instagram. But Instagram is just something that we're doing at the cafe and other places. The point I'm trying to make here is that instead of trying to do 20,000 things, which is get on social media, for instance, we're just picking Instagram. So last year, I bought a whole bunch of lights, and I decided, okay, we're going to do some video, and the lights are still sitting there. And you think, is that a bad idea? You shouldn't have bought the lights. But that was the strategy. The strategy was to do YouTube. We didn't do YouTube. We're doing Instagram, and we're sticking with Instagram. Would we end up on YouTube? There might be a possibility if we find that YouTube sends more people to Instagram. So everything goes with this 3 system, and everything goes, every yearly, then quarterly, and then weekly. Now, it's the weekly thing that is the most interesting of all. And the weekly thing is almost like Groundhog Day. I don't know how many of you have seen this movie, Groundhog Day, but essentially it's like living the same day over and over again. You wake up in the morning and almost nothing has changed. It's the same day. And that's approximately what my whole planning looks like. So it looks all very neat and all, and thank you very much for saying it's neat. But it's you look at it here, and it looks 6 o'clock, split the difference, 6 o'clock, split the difference, 6 o'clock, split the difference. 6 o'clock, split the difference, 6 o'clock, split the difference. And you look at, when you have time to look at it, when you get this recording, you'll see that it's recurring. It keeps going, almost like it's almost brain dead the way it goes about it. But that's progressive. So every day I learn Spanish just a little bit. Every day I do a little bit of something else. And that's how I go about it, bit by bit by bit. And what happens is that you look at it and you go, wow, this guy's so dedicated, so, disciplined. And 50% of this gets done. That's it. Most of the time, 50% will get done, 40% will get done, 60% will get done, but something will get done. And the weeks when nothing gets done, because those are the weeks when there's no planning. And of course, we had your yearly, your quarterly, your weekly, and then I just look at it before I go to sleep so that I know what the morning looks like. And again, this is very more or less. I want to stress this more or less kind of thing because a lot of people look at it and they go, I have to be like this if I want to achieve stuff in the same manner. And you don't. You just have to have a rigorous planning session. So we spend probably about a fifth or a sixth of our time in planning alone every week. That's a huge amount of time in planning. But what it does is, it's like driving. You're always looking at the road ahead and you're always readjusting. The people that say, okay, I'll just plan and I'll throw it in a drawer and, I'll look at it later. That's like driving blind. And we know how that ends. Now, as I said, my planning is all very neat. I actually have this perforated stuff so I can tear the page if it doesn't look neat. But let's look at Renuka's planning, just in case you don't want to do neat planning, because this is how her planning looks like. And I'm not laughing at her. I'm just letting you know that there is another method to plan. And yeah, I would probably tear out all my hair if I had to plan this way. But this works for her really well. That's her to-do list for the day, by the way. And then, as you can see, newsletters and product promotion. There's an enormous amount of planning. This is why it takes up a fifth or sixth of our time, because we're always planning. Look at it: Feb, March, April, May, June, July. This is the start of the year, and it's already moving into April at least. This is the Psychotactics website that's being done. Again, this is the way she plans. I can't make head or tail of it. I'm sure some of you can. Some of you will really like this kind of method. But I'm showing you this because, sometimes I will use paper. Sometimes I'll use like MindJet or mind mapping software. And it doesn't matter what you do. Sometimes I'll use technology and sometimes I'll use paper. But most of the time I use paper because it works. What you're really looking at, however, are two real systems. And the first is that you have new ideas, which is Instagram, talent book, all those things. That's the new ideas. And then you have to plan for recurring stuff. And that is to pay the bills. So your planning is always going to have these two dimensions. When you look at the stuff that we do, there is an enormous amount of planning. Again, this is just the podcast. If you look on the extreme left-hand side, there are the personal stories that I'm going to tell in the podcast. On December 16th, this is what happens. December 23rd. Everything is planned out in advance. Every podcast, every personal story, and I know this is really tiring. And it's tiring for us as well. When we go for a planning session, after that we go for lunch because we're like completely drained. So what you're going to see is that the recurring stuff is what gets results. Now, this started out in 2010, and this picture was taken 2 or 3 years ago. Every day, one little thing, Groundhog Day, over and over and over again. I looked at the podcast we do about 5,000 words a week, which I couldn't do before, by the way, so don't get impressed. I could only do like a 200-word article, then it went to 800 words. Now I do 5,000 words. And, we've finished almost 200. So if you multiply 200 by 5,000, that's 1,000,000 words in podcasts alone. But it's also these pictures, and it's all this daily bit by bit. And, when I look at this picture, when you look at this picture, you go, wow, that's a lot of books, lots of cartoons in those books. But if I really went according to my 100% plan, I'd have twice those books. So this is 50% or 40% or whatever. It's still a lot better than people who have 0 books. And that's what you have to understand, that eventually what we're doing is building scaffolding. We're going to paint the Sistine Chapel. We don't know what our Sistine Chapel looks like. We're sculptors, not painters, but we have this recurring thing. So Michelangelo had to pay his bills. He had to work out stuff. We have recurring, we have new. That's what our planning is all about. And that's what we do. Every week we have to put in a podcast, we have to put in newsletters, we have to go to 5,000 BC, we have to do all that stuff. And on top of that, we're doing kind of Instagram and whatever. So the new projects, I think, take a lot less time than the older projects, than the recurring ones. But over time, it's like being a monk. You meditate, you just slip into the meditation very quickly. So recurring becomes quick, and new is kind of slow, but over time, everything kind of works. It becomes like the spinning plates kind of scenario where you just put on a new plate and then it becomes part of your system. So in part 2, we covered 3 big things for the year. Then we looked at the quarterly plan. We looked at, every 15 days, 2 or 3 things. Then next 15 days, 2 or 3 things. And then we looked at the weekly groundhog thing, which is eventually it ends up to a lot of stuff. This takes us to the third part, which is how do we avoid burnout? Now, when you look at Antarctica, it's enormous, and yet people wanted to get to this place as quickly as possible. And one of those people were Ernest Shackleton. And Ernest Shackleton went down in history, in past history, as a failure because he didn't really get there. And, they built a hut, they did everything. They actually got pretty far, but they couldn't get to the finish point. Even so, Henry Worsley was a great fan of Ernest Shackleton because he found that this guy had done something which was amazing. And so he decided to follow in his tracks because Henry's or Worsley's uncle was also part of the original expedition. And so Ernest Shackleton, they got to 88 degrees south, and so did the Worsley's team or expedition. And they went off at this theme, and it made a huge difference because what happens in Antarctica is you don't get a second chance. You are going from the red zone to an orange zone to a green zone, and you ideally want to be in a green zone, but you're usually in orange and red. Well, they made it. Unlike Ernest Shackleton, they made it to the South Pole, and then Worsley decides to do a solo trip. Now, what you're looking at is he doesn't have a large expedition. He's 55 years old. He has no support. He has no food cache. He's dragging his own provisions on a sled. He's without dogs, without a sail. But he has meticulously planned this trip. And what happens? After 72 days, he doesn't make it. He gives up. But shortly after that, he dies. He gets bacterial peritonitis. Okay, it's an infection of thin tissue that lines the abdomen, and his liver fails, his kidney fails. He dies. And when they look at why did he die, the reason was that he was in the red zone for too long. When he was with his team, he did precisely the same thing. They dragged their own provisions at that point in time. They did exactly the same thing, except for the factor that he was with the team. And so they could pull him back, or they could pull each other back from the red zone to the orange zone enough times so that they could survive. When he was by himself, he was not able to look at himself in that way. And that's the problem. When you look at burnout, what we're looking for is three things: additional support, downtime, and being hobs. But the main thing that we're looking for is additional support. What does additional support mean? For instance, look at the podcast. A podcast is only 20 minutes, but it, on average, takes me a whole day. Now, you think of a day in 2014, I already had 5 full days where I was working, and pretty long days, as you can see from the planning itself. But then I decided to put in one more day of work. How does that day come in? So I started to do it, and I started to get burnt out. So this is kind of how the podcast goes. There's all this planning. You sit down, work it out, record it, edit it, put in the music. All of it takes up like 6-8 hours. What happened to me was I started to burn out. Everything was just driving me crazy. So I got someone to help me. And what he did was he just put in the music. And so for the past, I don't know, maybe 50 or 60 episodes, he's been putting in the music. And really what happened was you're looking at a team. Now, when you look online, most people talk about, oh, we should have a team. We should have a team. And then they're talking about 5 or 6 people. Most of the stuff is done by Renuka and me. And occasionally we'll have, like, for instance, with the podcast, someone doing the music. At one point, we had someone who was putting up the blog post. That's not true anymore. But you don't need a huge team, because what happens is when you start to build up a big team, you start to incur expenses, and eventually you have to feed the team, which is more marketing and more marketing and more marketing. What you're really looking at definitely is not working alone. That's very important. If you're working alone and you don't have some kind of support, then you can't do it. Like, to give you an example, last week we were in a negotiation with the builders because there was a dispute on the boundary. And Renuka came along, and we decided that I would ask the questions and she would listen in. And she heard stuff that I didn't hear at all. So that's what you call a team. You don't have to have like 15 people on your team, but you definitely have to have somebody else, because otherwise burnout is a reasonable possibility. Lots of people work with, their partners and their other people, but if you're working alone, progress is going to be very slow. And so you're going to need at least some level of support to avoid burnout. That's the first thing. The second thing is downtime. Now, downtime has always been by design. It's always been by design for us. We start the year by working out what breaks we're going to take. So it's not like we set in the work first, we set in the breaks first, and then after that, and sometimes, we don't know what we're doing, but it's always very clear that the breaks have to go in first. And if you go back to, say, 2004, 2005, our business was still a year old. We're probably earning around $2,000 a month. So it wasn't like we were, making a lot of money online or doing anything. And we weren't doing anything else. So if you say, well, you're earning $2,000 a month, well, we weren't doing anything else at that point in time. This was our whole business. But we decided back in India that we had always been working, and we never took any breaks, and we never did anything, not as much as we expected to anyway. So what was the point of having the business if all we were doing was working all the time? And so we started putting in breaks. Now, you can be as creative as your breaks. You don't have to go to Yosemite, which is where these pictures were taken. You don't have to go up to New Zealand. You can go just close by. But having that downtime, I think, is more crucial today than ever. And the question that you have to ask yourself is more a reframing, which is, how can I do my work in less time? So if you ask someone, how do you take 3 months off? The answer is, I don't know. I can't take 3 months off. But if you reframe the question and you say, can you do a year's work in 9 months? And you'll be surprised at how many people say yes. Maybe they can't do it in 9 months. Maybe they can do it in 11 months. Maybe they can do it in 10.5 months. But you'll be surprised at when you ask someone, can you go to the supermarket in 15 minutes? They say yes. But you go, can you go there in 5 minutes? And they also say yes. So what's happening there is you have to ask yourself a question which is reframed. Can you actually do a year's work in 9 months? Can you do 3 months work in 2 months? Can you do 4 months work in 3 months? Because that's what we have to do. When we get on that plane on April 10th, everything has to be in. So we know that we have to make some changes and do something different so that we can finish everything before we leave, and at least for when we get back. This is what enables us to take a long stretch of a break. And a lot of clients showed lots of reluctance when we started out, and more people are writing in and saying, you know, I'm taking 3 weeks off, I'm taking 4 weeks off. And reframe the question. That's all I'm saying. Reframe the question. How can you do X amount of work or earn X amount of dollars in shorter time? And finally, this is, I don't know, it's just, most people aren't, you know, on 5000 BC and psychotactics, they're not the people that want to make millions of dollars and do that kind of thing. They just want a good life. But even so, this comic strip is the one that I keep in front of me the whole time. And essentially you can read it, but the core of it is that if you want anything in the world right now, what would it be? That's what Calvin asks. And it shoots forward to Hobbes coming up with the concept of a sandwich. And he goes, talk about a failure of imagination. I'll ask for $1 trillion billion. This is typical of people. I want this, all of this stuff. But eventually, one person gets his wish. And the reason why he gets his wish is not because the other one is crazy, but because he knows what his sandwich is. And for us, it was very critical that we took our breaks. It was very critical that, you know, we spent time with our nieces. It was very critical that I had time to cook and paint and do all these things. And that was the sandwich. If I say to you when I meet you, you know, what is your sandwich? And you don't know what is your sandwich, how are you going to get there? How could you get there? If you don't know that, you know, I need to make 15 trips to the beach this year because I love the beach, how are you going to get to the beach? It's not just going to happen. So, you know, if you scrap everything that we have learned so far and you just get to your sandwich, that's going to make you happy. But in that happiness, I think the revenue comes in as well. So this brings us to the end of part 3. And as I promised, it takes 40 minutes. I know, because that's how the slides work. But the 3 things that we covered in part 3 are additional support, get some additional support, downtime, and know your sandwich. Be Hobbes. So this takes us to what most people are waiting for, which is goal finishing. And this takes us to someone like Darwin. He wrote The Origin of Species. He did 8 years of research. So why did he print his book, the book on evolution? Because originally he told his wife, you know, when I die, here's some money, print the book. It was because Alfred Russel Wallace, a competitor, decided that he wanted to print a book. He wanted to print his whole thing on evolution. And so that's why Darwin printed the book. Not for any other reason. Not because it was, you know, it was time, or it was, you know, he could do it. He just got pushed into it. Inga Lehmann, you may have not heard of Inga Lehmann, but she was the one, Danish. She has, she discovered Earth's inner core. Why did she do that? She was in a world dominated by men. She wanted to prove her point. She wanted to show how you know, women could work out stuff. Now, this is not as crazy as it sounds. It was the scientific world, even today, is so dominated by men. So this was her pressure. It was like, I have to do this right now. You look at, this is Sir Edmund Hillary he climbed, first guy to climb Mount Everest with Norgay Tenzing. In the 50s, Tibet only allowed one expedition per year. So he had one crack at it. That was it. It was in 1954, the French were going. In 1955, the Swiss were going. So he had to make it. When you're looking at all of these people, Florence Nightingale, born in a very rich family, but she wanted to be a nurse. Why did she end up becoming this nurse and becoming the symbol of nursing today? It's because of the Crimean War. There was a war. The women were only allowed to clean the floors. They were not allowed to touch the patients. But they ran out of people that could work with the injured. And that's how she got in. And so when we look at history, you can pick any person in history and go, oh, they made a plan and they stuck to the plan, and nothing like that. Almost every single thing you see in history, every person, every project has been because of somebody else's agenda or something pushed them in. So eventually gold finishing is not something that anybody can teach you. The gold finishing thing is only a factor of urgency. And I'll show you the second picture. This is another way of gold finishing. And this is the third way of gold finishing. So I could keep showing you these cartoons all day long, but essentially it comes to the same thing. The only way you're going to do or finish a goal is if there is a factor of urgency. Now, how do you do that? One of the ways that we have to do it at Psychotactics, look at this webinar, for instance. This webinar is nothing. I hadn't planned this webinar. I didn't want to do this webinar. A client asked us to do this webinar. We said, okay, we went ahead with it. So we sold the concept. Now, for the whole of pretty much 2 or 3 weeks, I have been going to the cafe in sporadic bursts and working on this webinar. Would this exist? No, it would never exist. And so you've got to recognize that these things don't exist by themselves. We sold the concept, and if one person turned up for this webinar, or 50 people or 500 people, it doesn't matter. You still have to do the same amount of effort. So what we do, and I know this sounds really bizarre because not everybody has a list, and not everybody has the clients, and not everybody has everything. But sell the concept to one person, like physically take money from one person and give them a date. And you'll be surprised at how that one person, first of all, goes to 2 and 3 and 4. And, sometimes it's really bad. Sometimes, we've done a workshop in Australia where only one person turned up. And they turned up much later, just by chance. It happens. So you never get to hear about the bad stuff that happens, but there is going to be good stuff and bad stuff. You just have to sell it, and then you have to deliver. Now, to give you an example, it doesn't always have to be a physical sale. So Renuka has started her own Instagram account. A lot of the cartoons are new. A lot of the cartoons she's done in the past. And if you look at it, it's got Renuka's own style, which is Renuka Madness. So what's happening is now, just by starting this account, she's pushing herself to do 1 cartoon a day. So this is an external deadline. There is no sale happening, not yet. But you start to get, followers and stuff. And if you look, she's up to 86 followers. It's not too bad. When you think that nobody knows who she is, this is not like people from Psychotactics who have been sent there. She's just got onto Instagram, and she's organically building up this thing one by one. I did the same thing with Psychotactics. I've done only 12 posts, and I hope you're impressed with 658 followers. But those followers have been, I started out with 655 about 3 weeks ago. So in all, Renuka has done really well. she's got like 86 followers and I've got 3. So because the 655 were there over the last 3 or 4 years, they just found Psychotactics and they hit the follow button. So I've got 3 followers despite putting in a lot of effort. Here's another Instagram account, 6 Spices in the Pressure Cooker. I was taking photographs anyway and putting them on Facebook. I put it on Instagram. Now this has been from the ground up. Nobody has been sent from anywhere. And you can look, that's 255 followers. Now I know you're probably thinking, what this follow business has to do with anything? It doesn't have to do with anything. At some point, these might turn into a business and might not turn into a business. Here's what I'm saying, that the need to do this every single day is the external deadline. And that's what we're really working at. So you either sell something, you put some editorial up, which is how most blogs started. And of course, if you're in 5000 BC, you know the Taking Action Forum. So the Taking Action Forum is probably one of the more nicer ways to go about it, because you're dealing with people you know or you get to know over time. And, you know, it's again that Groundhog Day, little bits, little bits, little bits, and eventually we end up becoming unclumsy. So this brings us to the end of this webinar. We started out with the fetch out concept. We figured out, wait a second, out of these 6 things, 7 things, what's important? Then we had the doubt, what if I'm wrong? How do I fix this thing? And you're going to be wrong. You just have to work it out as you go along. But then you have to strategize. You go, okay, yearly, I'm going to work on these 3 things. Quarterly, I'm going to work on a smaller subset. And then the weekly thing is the most critical of all. The weekly thing is where it's going to be iterative or repetitive or Groundhog Day, like little bits, little bits, little bits. And when you're thinking about it, think of the little booklet. It started out with this tiny little booklet, you know, just like tiny little graphics like this. And now we've got books and books, or rather I have a whole bunch of books, and it's just this everyday little bit. And 50% of the time I don't even get to it. So for instance, this week, I didn't do any paintings because I had other things to do. How do you avoid burnout? Additional support. I can't stress this enough. At some point, you have to work out how you're going to pay for that additional support. Start off with smaller amounts, smaller projects, and then, you know, farm out some of the stuff. You can't do everything yourself. Downtime, work out the downtime in advance. Europe does this better than other places. Australia and New Zealand also have specific time off where everything shuts down. And I'm talking about businesses as well. When I got to New Zealand as a cartoonist, I couldn't get any work in December. I couldn't get any work in January. You had to shut down because everyone goes on vacation. So some countries have this shutdown period where, you know, nobody's working. If that's not the case, then you have to work it out for yourself. And finally, when I meet you, I'm going to ask you, do you know your sandwich? And if you don't know your sandwich, we're going to have to sit down and build a sandwich. But I think you can do this by yourself. So be Hobbs. And that's pretty much it for today. So as always, if you want to achieve anything, you have to have your deadline in place. Let's go to questions now, and I'll be happy to take any questions for as long as I need to. Okay, so you have to unmute yourself because you might be on mute. Yes, John.
I was going to say, which John? Is there more than one?
Yeah, but I saw you putting on your headset, so I assumed it was you.
Okay. Well, anyway, I was going to do a sideways on you. When are you going to start sending out the recipes?
What's it? Oh, yes.
Sorry.
When I sell it to you.
Okay.
Yeah, when I sell it to you. Yeah. So there have been a few questions that have come in already. I hope I haven't missed any of them, but if I have, just type them again. Now, one of the questions is, do you allow time for unexpected opportunities? And if yes, how? Well, this is what chaos planning is all about. I don't know if you've read the book, but even if you haven't read the book or don't intend to read the book, the point is that every single day I leave 3 hours free. Every single week, Friday is free. Now you say, how's that possible? The problem is that chaos doesn't care. Chaos comes into every single day, comes to every single trip, every single thing that you do. And if you don't plan for it, then all you do is get stressed. So do you have to allow time for unexpected opportunities? Yes. And my quota is 3 hours in a day. I know nobody has 3 hours in a day, but I put in from 12 o'clock to 3 o'clock, I have no appointments. And whether I sleep in that time or whether I go to the cafe in that time or I draw in that time or I work in that time, that's irrelevant. But that time is not, like, I'm not going to have a meeting. I'm not going to do any specific project on that. It's going to be my free time, as you want to call it. So that's the first thing that, and again, as I said, it's written in great detail. I don't know why it needed a book, but the book seems to work really well. So chaos planning answers that question. Every single day is going to have unexpected opportunities and chaos. So plan for it that way. So that's one question. Then the second one is, I have a group program that runs on a continuous basis. How to disconnect for a significant period of time? This is a really good question. I have the same problem. It's called 5000 BC. I also have the same problem when I'm doing a course. So what I did was I had to figure out. So now when you see the courses, they go for 3 months and then they stop and then we go on vacation. That wasn't the case. When we started out the article writing course, it went for 9 months. When we started out the Protégé, it went for a whole year. So it wasn't like I had the flexibility. But at some point I thought, look, if I'm getting tired with this stuff, everybody else is also getting tired. So I'm going to give them a break. And so we designed the courses so that we went for 3 months, we had a break, and went for 3 months and had a break. And maybe the break is not a month long, maybe it's just a week long, or maybe it's just 2 weeks long. But it's possible to tell your audience, your customers, that there is going to be a break. Now, there is a very interesting phenomenon that occurs with the break, by the way. And this is for anybody. Let's say you're teaching your kids, for instance. It's applicable to them as well. You're teaching somebody else as well. It's applicable to them as well. People who take a break come out smarter and faster after the break, having done nothing in the break. I don't know how this happens, but I guess the brain works out what it did in the past 3 months or 2 months or whatever. So we do this with my niece, Marsha. It seems like a waste of time when we're mentoring her to let her go for like 3 weeks or 4 weeks, just a break. And she comes out much faster and much better. You start off a bit slow when she comes back, but much better. Same thing I did with the watercolor course. I conducted a watercolor course, and almost everyone took that break, and some people didn't take the break. But almost everybody ended up better. So as someone who's designing a course, designing something for clients, I would say design the break in it and explain why you're doing it. So you get your break, they get the break, and it's actually superior to not having a break. So that's the question, and I hope that brings the answer, gives you the answer. If not, send me another question. Another question is, how do you think of all the aspects in your strategy planning session? I don't. I just sit there and write down everything that comes into my head. I mean, you think of going out into the garden. You go, okay, you're going to plant a tree. Well, what are the aspects that come in? There's soil, there's water, there's maybe some natural fertilizer. There are a whole bunch of things come into your head. Is it going to be right? You don't know. I grew a curry leaf tree outside my window for 5 years. It did nothing. So then I had to change my strategy, and I complained to my father. My father usually gives me long sessions that ramble for a while, but on that day he just said, cut out every leaf on the tree except the top 2 or top 3. If you look outside my window now, I have a curry leaf tree, not a curry leaf plant. There are like thousands of curry leaf shoots everywhere. So yeah, that's probably an exaggeration, maybe hundreds. So there you go. There is not going to be a specific strategy. You're going to have to come out just like you do with your kid, or do with your parent, or you do with your, someone you're given charge. There is no manual for everything. You just have to come up with what you think is feasible, and then you have to test it, and then you can get advice from, say, people in 5000 BC, or your friends, or whoever else is around. How do I keep the planning notes? I am pretty hopeless, so I just take photographs of it and keep it in Evernote. I can find, in Evernote, I have a planning folder, and you get a free version of Evernote. You don't have to buy it. I buy it because usually I'm working offline, and the paid version, which is about $75. Sometimes you can get some kind of discount somewhere, but usually $75 a year. You can get the offline version, so, or you can access it offline, and that's where I keep it. I now have a book, but there's no telling with me. I mean, Renuka always laughs because I buy another book, and then I have a paper, then I have a writing pad, then I have something on the, she's got one book. Like, my stuff looks organized, but she is organized. I'm completely all over the place. Hi, Simon. Yeah, so I could only say one thing. When I do something, I just take a picture, put it in Evernote, then I can find it. This is how I found all the graphics. I mean, all those pictures of 2005 and stuff. I found it because I kept it in Evernote. Yeah, so if you can't find stuff, that's all I can say. Renuka told me to ask you this in the question and answer session. Does the TAP process, the taking action process, work with the 12-year week program? I have no clue. I suspect that I don't know what the 12-week year is, but I suspect that any planning is going to be better than no planning. And the execution is going to depend on who's sitting on your head. I mean, the Sistine Chapel was never going to get done. That Pope Alexander, I said Sixtus, I think, first, but it was Pope Alexander. He was a complete nutter. He used to beat people with a stick, and I think Michelangelo got a couple of whacks as well. So if you want motivation, find someone with a stick, I guess. And that's how it's going to work. I'm sorry to be so flippant, but the problem is that no plan works at all. And the only plan that ever works is someone sitting on your head saying, when can I have this? Most of our products, and there's the pressure. There is the pressure of, okay, I'm not going to be able to finish this. And sometimes we've done that. I've say written a book on pricing when I did the books on pricing, and I finished one book, and I thought, well, nobody's going to remember that it's on the 5th of November. On the 3rd of November, someone will write, are the books ready? And you go, oh, shit, I have to do these books now. And then, now, of course, only probably 1 or 1.5 books are going to be ready. And no one cares, because you go, okay, the first book is going to be delivered on the 5th, the second one will be on the 12th, and the third one on the 19th. And they're more than happy. Now, of course, if you're doing a software program, for instance, you can't deliver it in pieces. For a lot of books and stuff, you can do it this way. So you have to decide, okay, I'm going to have all the software ready, but the bonus is not going to be ready. I'm going to have this ready, but I'm not going to have that ready. Or I'm just going to be lazy until the last minute, and I'm going to do everything at the last minute. But there is no magic trick for anything. Eventually, I guess as I said, you have to have a Pope with a stick. That's going to work. That's your phrase for the year now. Pope with a stick. In the beginning of the presentation, you mentioned the word standoff or something like that. I don't know what standoff is. Yeah, I could answer this later if you go back to the beginning of when you get the recording and let me know what that is. How do you design the breaks if you allow people to join at any time? For the courses, we don't allow people to join at any time. For 5000 BC, we do, but if you've ever been to 5000 BC as a newcomer and you try to sign up, you will see a notice there saying Sean is on vacation, Renuka is on vacation. However, if you'd like to join right now, you can spend the month looking over the information, and when they come back, you can ask questions, or you can jump in and ask the community, and they're extremely helpful, and they will answer. So there is this very clear notice telling people that we are not around. And you would think that would drive people away, and it doesn't. Some of them decide, okay, we'll wait, and you know, maybe half of them decide, okay, that sounds like a good plan. Why would I go in, not read anything, and just start to ask questions? But some of them might have the agenda, okay, I need to ask questions right away. It doesn't matter. So you design the breaks telling people in advance that there is going to be this break. And even when we had courses like, say a course like the watercolor course went for 4 months, well, we had 3 months. We said, we're going to go for 3 months. We'll have a break for a month. We'll come back and we'll finish after that. So you're just being very transparent with the client, and it works. I don't know why it works, but it works. So you don't have to be weird. You just have to tell the client in advance. And I don't know, sometimes it's possible that you've started something, it's beyond you, and you just need to tell the clients, look, I'm burning up or burning out right now. I need to take a break for 3 weeks. I will be back. You'll be surprised at how many people don't object to it. You'll be really surprised. Ideally, you want to prepare for it, but even if you run into a situation, your burnout is not good for you and it's not good for the client. So what I would say is take the break. Can you elaborate on the B. Hobbs and sandwich thing? Okay, so the comic strip, which you will see if you just Google it, essentially the sandwich is the concept of what really makes me happy. And this is in, you know, but a lot of people, they say, oh, I want to take me, for example. My first website was called $1 Million, right? That is not a sandwich. That is like the whole buffet. That probably more than a whole buffet. What am I going to do with $1 million? That's, you know, but when you start out, you go, you know, all my plans were, one of my plans was to be on Oprah. This is part of the actual goal setting, by the way. Another of the plans was to have Sting and Billy Joel come to my birthday. If you're laughing, you have good reason to do so, but this is the kind of planning that you get from books that tell you, just write it down, put it on your mood board, everything's going to happen. But really, what, you know, to me, the exciting thing about life is like, okay, I can go to the beach, or I can do this, or I can do that. If you don't know what you really want to do, like, you know, I want to cook a new meal every day. That's kind of my sandwich. So at 10:30 every morning, I go and I cook the meal, and I'm really happy. And so at the end of the day, maybe I won't finish some of the projects, maybe I won't do, but you say, did you get your sandwich for today? And I have to know what my sandwich is. Yeah, I cooked the meal, I did my drawing, I did this thing, I'm done for the day. I'm never going to get to 100% of my goals. So I have to define what's going to make me happy in the day. And that's what the sandwich is about. Whereas Calvin is going, you know, I want $1 billion. I want to planet, I want this. And that's kind of what you see on the internet. That's what you want to buy into, but not really what you want. It's not even a need. It's not even what you want. So I hope I answered the sandwich question.
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'm trying to figure out. Okay, and you guys haven't seen me with my glasses, so there you go, glasses. Now I can read. That's just for reading, by the way. So apart from the K-valves, who takes care of psychotactics when you're on holiday? Nobody. We do have someone who will take care of the email, but usually the email is very simple. It says, Sean and Renuka are on holiday, they're drinking, eating in Italy or wherever, and if you'd like us to respond quickly, then we can, but if not, then I'll make sure that he responds when he gets back. And in 90% of the cases, that's enough. 10% of the time, people don't have a download, don't have something, and that's very easy because you just send them the download and they're happy. So nobody takes care of anybody. It wasn't my plan to have anyone take care of anything. In fact, on holiday, my original plan was to come back into 5000 BC. This is way at the start. And I remember someone like Paul Wolf, who said, get out of here, because if you work on your vacation, then what are we supposed to do? So that's it. I was banned out. I was banned from 5000 BC ever since on vacation. Yeah, cool. Okay, I can do the Pope with the stick cartoon for you guys. Someone wanted the Pope with the stick. I'll do a really good one. Yeah, I can do that. Then Matt asked, you talk about expecting to be wrong. It doesn't sound like a good attitude to have about a sandwich. No, this is not. The sandwich you already know. The sandwich you already know what makes you happy. The expecting to be wrong is usually the projects. If you start to paint the Sistine Chapel, there's no way you would know that a northern wind is going to come in there and put salt on the walls and put moisture and get fungus. You're expecting to be wrong because the project is way beyond your capability. And in most cases, I would say that you can tweak the project and make it work to your advantage. And sometimes you just have to bail out. Like, with 5000 BC back in 2005, I showed you all those things. We just bailed out of that. It wasn't something that we could do or wanted to do, and so we just bailed out. How much do you bail out of? How much do you keep? If it's not working for you consistently, I think you have to bail out. But otherwise, I would say that it's more a question of tweaking. When we started, I know I'm talking about Instagram, but that's my latest baby now. When we start on that, I start out with 255, go up to 260, come back to 255, go to 260, come back to 255. It's like this maddening thing. So either I'm doing something correctly, which is I'm getting true followers that I can then get to subscribers at some point, or I'm doing something hopelessly wrong. So if I'm at 255 a year from now, or 6 months from now, you can assume that I'm doing something really stupid. And maybe you have to bail out from it or just do it like a fun activity. The problem, if you've now grown up in a situation where risk is normal, and say maybe you've had a job, or maybe your parents have always had a job, it's very normal to expect that if you do this, this is going to happen. If you go to work, you get a wage. If you do this, you do. And that's the complete opposite of business. You do 3 things and you make $20,000, and you do 40 things and you make no money, or that's just the nature of business. And you're just going to have to tweak as you go along. I don't know if that answered your question. Have I missed out on any questions? I seem to have gone to the end. If I have, can you type your question again, because I may have missed it out.
I have a question.
Okay, go for it.
You said you only achieve 50% of your daily tasks, which you planned out.
Yeah.
What about the other 50%?
It's for tomorrow.
Are they okay? They go into the next day.
Yes.
And then it will be full the next day, and 50% of the next day, of the day later. Okay.
Right, but when you take, I mean, if you take a big project, it's difficult to imagine that, right? But for instance, if I have this little thing in front of me here, this little booklet, I don't know if you can see. So see this is like, I didn't finish the drawing. So I don't know if you can see it clearly, but it's a pencil sketch, right? And you'll know that it's pencil because on the next page, say you can see there's a painted version of it. So that is 50%. I just got the pencil thing done. Tomorrow I'll do a wash, maybe the day. I do this for everything. I do this for painting. I do this for cooking. Like when I left this morning, I kept some stuff out to make the yogurt. That's going to do its own thing. But when I'm going to make, say, lunch, all the lentils and stuff have been soaked. So that one part has been done. And then later on, I will do the next part and the next part. With articles, you've seen this in 5000 BC. One day I'll come in, I'll just write the headline and I'll go, to be continued, to be continued. And then, then I'll write like the 3 things I'm going to write in that article. And then I'll go and I'll come back the next day. So it's very iterative. And I think it's also superior to trying to finish everything on the same day. Because what happens is you've been thinking about it and it comes back a lot better. I don't think you can ever do 100%. No, I'm pretty positive you can't do 100% of everything every day. I'm pretty positive. So.
Okay, so you split out every bigger project in different tasks, which you solve at other days.
Yes. What I'm trying to do is I'm going, okay, this is my deadline. My deadline is, I don't know, 10th of April because I have to get on a flight. Now, before the 10th of April, we're away for 4 weeks and we have 2 more weeks when we come back, just so that I don't have to work when we come back, because it's impossible to work after a month away. So you say now 6 weeks of podcasts, and then how many weeks to April? That's 4 weeks. So now I have 10 weeks of podcasts. That's very clear in my mind now. I have to do 10 podcasts. Now, are all the 10 going to be brand new? Are some of them going to be reruns? This is where the strategy comes in. I will sit down today and go, I have to finish all the 10 podcasts by next week. Of course, nothing's going to happen. I might finish 1. But eventually, when I have that deadline, it's going to happen. 10 podcasts are going to happen by April 10th. But if I don't write it down, and if I don't go about it in that progressive manner, 0. And I know this to be true because before 2014, all the way from, say, 2000 to 2014, we had 0. I started out doing some coffee cartoons, which is similar to the cartoons that you're seeing now on Instagram, but different. And I did like 6 or 8 or 9 of them, and they were all really good ones. And then I go, I'm gonna do a book. That was 7 years ago, maybe 10 years ago, right? So it's not just that I have to do it, but there's also some kind of deadline. The reason why I do that in 5000 BC, I could quite easily, say, I'm going to write this article and keep it on my desk. But the moment I put it on 5000 BC, someone comes and puts a smiley there. Now I'm doomed. Right? So, but then I don't have to finish the entire article in that one given day. I do it in bits and pieces. And so it's the same thing with everything, with the food, with the drawings, with everything. You just taking little bits at a time, and you achieve a lot. I don't know if that answered your question. Okay. It says, I tend to constantly build new offers without having the previous ones optimally marketing wise, meaning I improve everything slowly, focusing on one thing until it works great before moving on to something new. How do you fine tune between two things? I think this is everyone's problem in a way, for a couple of things. The first thing is, let me address this in two ways. The first thing is that we create, or I tend to want to create something new all the time. So I'll do this course, then I want to do another course, I want to create another one. It's very interesting to me to create something brand new. The problem is then that we have to market it. And last year, I don't know if you noticed, but I don't expect you to notice because you won't read every single email that comes to you. But last year, we decided to not do any courses. And in doing that, not doing any courses, we had to then promote what we had as already done as home studies. And to our surprise, we earned as much from selling the home study versions of the previous courses as me doing a live course. So kind of so that's one kind of answer to the question, that often we're spending so much time creating new stuff and doing new stuff that the old stuff just sits there, and it's possible that it would create some amount of revenue, bring new clients, or do something. And because we just go, okay, we can do a new course or we can do a new workshop, we do the next thing and we don't sell the old thing. And that was a pretty big learning for us last year. The second part of it was that I'm also into improving everything. So 2 years ago in 2016, we did the article writing course, and it went from version 1 to version 2.0. So the first thing is that I make sure that all the clients know that this is like software that's going from version 1 to version 1.1. And yeah, software is always cool. So when we do that, what happens is that, yeah, I've lost my train of thought. But essentially what I'm doing is I'm not trying to improve everything at one go. The copywriting course, for instance, was in version 1.0 for the last almost 10 years now. We'll be working on version 2.0. And the funny thing is that clients who bought version 1.0 also want version 2.0. Big surprise, of course, if you've bought Photoshop 1.0 and 2.0 and 3.0. But that's how it is. So selling versions really helps, but also selling stuff that you already created instead of running after the new one and the next one also creates some amount of downtime and breathing space for you. I think that constantly building new offers and not marketing or improving the previous one is a problem. And the reason why we tend not to do it is because we have no time. And just by saying, okay, I'm not going to do any more courses this year, means I had time, means we had time to think about it and plan it and roll it out. And that was the difference. I don't know if that answers the question, but if it doesn't, just come back and I'll answer it again. Okay. Neha asked, could you talk a bit about your childhood and how it trained you to set the goals? I don't know, because I just hit see this? I just went down here. So the childhood is not really helping me here. But I think this is a kind of loaded question, not because I don't want to answer it, but because I think that everybody has different parents. So if you have 3 kids in the family, or those 3 kids don't have the same parents, they have different parents. The the first kid is brought up differently from the second. And all parents say, oh, all my kids are exactly the same to me. They're not. You were a different person when the first kid was born. You're a different person when the second kid is born. And, you know, the first kid tends to get more responsibility. Look after your sister. Look after your brother. Go out and buy the bread. So my parents threw everything at me. Blood tests, go out, you know, this blood test has to be brought back from my sister never did it. Blood test, bread, sometimes on the same day. Blood test, bread, and I don't know, something else. Milk, same day. You know, my sister grew up in a different environment as I did, different residence, different scenario. Something as simple as buying milk was a big drama where I had to go out at 5 in the morning to stand in a queue to get the milk. By the time she was around, she never had to do that. And even if she wanted to do it, milk was available in the store. So I know I'm not answering your question, but the point is that your childhood, what your parents did and what they threw at you in terms of responsibility enables you to have more risk as a kid. And then the more risk you have, the less you're afraid of that risk or things going wrong as an adult. That's just how it is. If your parents were in business, like, you know, my father was in business, my uncles were in business, my grandfather was in business. So it was normal for me. If your parents were all working, for instance, then your environment is different. There is that formula doesn't exist. You know, bringing up a kid, the only thing I can say is, if you have a kid, if you have a student, if you have someone, give them more responsibility than less. Push them more outside their comfort zone than trying to protect them. Protecting people doesn't help so much. So I guess I got the protection I needed, and then after that was just go and get the blood test. That was it. Okay. So anyway, so that's anybody. Do you validate ideas before you create things, or do you just create and see what happens? This is a very good question, but the answer is that I don't validate the ideas. I do what I pretty much like. How does it work? That's the question. The answer is that every idea can be linked to a problem. So let's say you create some product, like, I don't know, just about, say, for instance, now, you create, what happens is that when you create a product, it's usually solving some problem, and you can take a random problem and connect it to that idea. How do I give you an example? Let's say you create something like glasses, right? And you say you want to create glasses that can be taken anywhere. So for instance, these glasses, I can't take them everywhere. When I go for a walk in the morning, I can't take them anywhere, because of course I can't take these for a walk. So what these guys did was they just came up with glasses that stick on the back of your iPhone or your phone. And it costs like $20 to buy the glasses. So they created the idea. Do they need to validate it? No, they don't need to validate it, because the problem already exists. There are already people going out for a walk every morning, and they need to read something. Sorry. They need to read something at the cafe, and that's that. But here's the thing. I've answered this question, and it looks like I'm running out of ability to speak simply because I'm sitting down. If I stand up, I don't have this problem. I've already answered this question in 5000 BC, and email me if you have this question. I will dig out the answer, and it's written in great detail. My brain is not capable of giving you examples now, but the answer exists. So you don't need to validate the ideas. However, if you want to validate ideas, the system that was described by Adam Grant in his book was one of taking the idea to your peers. That is, people who are not customers, but people just like you. So if you're a marketer, other marketers. If you're an author, other authors. And you give them your idea and see how they react. And usually they are more critical of your work than the average customer. So they tend to be, you know, okay, this is a great idea, or this is a bad idea. However, I think even that is dangerous. I think the best way to solve the problem is to link whatever you're selling. Like, for instance, if you say you're selling pizza, but then you link it to a problem, which is that mothers need to have something that small kids can handle. So now there's a problem that already exists. It's got nothing to do with pizza, but then you link that problem with the pizza that you're selling. And that's what I can think of right now. But other than that, send me an email and I'll answer your question. Can we do more of this seminar? Yes. It takes a long time. I don't know if you guys noticed how many slides there were and how many cartoons there were. Anyone want to guess how many slides I had? Just type your answer. Of course, now I've set you up for a bigger number, but 16, 99, 30, 80, 110. You can keep going, by the way. 120, still higher, not 200, fewer than 200. But on average, a seminar tends to have between 160 to 200. And that's why it's kind of movie-like. The fewer slides you have, the more it gets stuck on the slide for like half an hour while blah, blah, blah is going on. So yeah, there were about 158 slides. I can talk about how I did those effects in the cave for sure. Did I miss some question along the way? Yeah, and yeah, I actually, this is my favorite way of communicating through slides, and I love presentations. So yes, I definitely want to do more of these. Renuka spoke to me yesterday. She said, you know, you did that burnout thing, the third section of your presentation, which is about burnout. I want you to pay attention to that. So that was my cautionary tale yesterday when I said, oh, let's do eight sessions of the brain audit next, you know, and she was like, okay, how about the burnout part? So we'll see. We'll see. Well, we might, it might fit in the small products plan. We'll see. I'll see how I get around it. What else? Let me just see. Okay. So yeah, the slides have the cartoons and they have everything else. It's good because I enjoy drawing the cartoons as well. Now, Kai says, I had more than 10 info courses during last year by teaching in course management. It makes some sales. Each product sells between 90 to 9,000. Which one should I choose to grow a big info product? I think you have to mix it up a bit. If you go and buy whiskey, for instance, and this surprised me, and you buy really good whiskey like Lagavulin and Ardbeg and stuff like that, you would think that once you've spent, I don't know, $170 on a bottle of whiskey, that will be enough. Apparently, it's not enough. 170 is where you start. And so what we have here is a principle called anchoring. And anchoring means that, for instance, when we started out, I used to follow somebody, and his name was Jay Abraham. And Jay Abraham's courses were all at 25,000 or something like that, some ridiculous amount. And the first time I bought a product from him was $300. And I thought, wow, that's so cheap, right? How did $300 become cheap? Because of the $25,000. So I'm not suggesting you have anything for $25,000, but the reason why our smaller products grew last year is because we now have a greater range of smaller products and bigger products. And because we were marketing more of the home studies last year, people saw the prices, $800, $1,200. And then something like $50 didn't seem expensive. It seemed cheap. So having a whole bunch of services or products that you may never need to have, like you can actually, I'm not suggesting you do this, but you can have if you have a service, you can have a fictitious service in place. This fictitious service is $25,000. You don't have to have it in place already, but it creates the anchor. So it is possible. We've never done it, but just from your own perspective, your own mindset, if you can create a whole, and I've talked about this in the pricing model as well, which is, think of it as dining out. You have the starter, you have, the wine, you go to the main, you come down to the ice cream and the coffee. Build your products like the Himalayas, like a mountain range, goes up, 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 comes down. So if you look at something like, say, if I were to design something like, say, article writing, I would say, okay, first they would buy outlining, second they would buy maybe first 50 words, third they would buy the main course, fourth they would buy something which was lesser than the main course, which is something akin to ice cream, and then, coffee or dessert. And so you design it in that way. It's going to take time, and this is what the whole goal setting thing is about. But that makes a big difference in the sense that clients get an anchor. The main course is $3,500. This costs $50. This is good, and when you tell them that there is a sequence, then they follow the sequence as well. So if you don't tell them, if you just throw everything, everything to do with article writing, I'm not going to follow the sequence. But notice when you go out to dinner, you always follow the sequence, and that's because they tell you what the sequence is all about. So that's very important. So 2 or 3 very important points there. First is build it so it goes from like a meal. Secondly, tell them that it's a meal, that it's going from this way to that way, and then make sure that the top price is your anchor, because everything else is going to flow from there. Okay. How do you make sure that your home studies don't ruin the attractiveness of your live courses? Oh man, I'm doing really well with this chair. If the content is similar. The content, that's very easy. The live courses, you've never done a live course at Psychotactics, so it's hard to answer this. But if you do a live course with Psychotactics, you'll about 25 people do a course, and they generate about 10,000 posts in 3 months. That kind of tells you how much interaction there is from both the group that you're in, as well as how much I look at your stuff. So if you've come to a live workshop or a live course, you'll see that there is a huge difference in terms of how much input, small tweaks that you're getting on a consistent basis. more than 50% of the people that join live courses who have been to a live course, our live course, then sign up for the next course. So there's not much push out there. We don't have to sell anything once they've done a live course or come to a live workshop. So that's the easy part. The second part is the people that haven't been, but they've decided, okay, I'm not the home study kind of person. Now, Simon's here. Simon's very effectively gone through the home study of the article writing course. And he's a home study kind of guy. So or maybe it was a budget issue, or maybe he has a pope with a stick. I don't know.
I think all of them, yeah. It was actually, it was a budget thing, first of all, yeah.
Yeah. So I personally, I think that most people want to do a live course. If you give me a choice between a live course and a home study, if I know that the teacher is good, I'm going to join the live course. So we take a lot of trouble, and remind me when you get to 5000 BC to show you the topic about prospectus. Because what happens in the prospectus is we send them the prospectus and people talk about what happened in the live course. And so then I don't have to do any selling. I just have to send it to them. And that way they get the idea of what the live course is and why it's more valuable than the home study. However, yeah, even if it's identical, it makes no difference. People want what they want at that point in time, and depending on their budget and their time and whatever else. John said, why does Starbucks have a 2,500 espresso machine? Yeah, it makes the other machines look affordable, yes. And some people pay for the 2,500, but yeah. We try not to sell stuff that we don't want to sell, but people's motivations are different. I seem to have run out of questions. If there are any more, we'll take them. If not, we'll do our next webinar. Any questions before we go? All right. Well, thank you for being on this call. It was great. This is the first time I'm doing it anyway, so it was good for me as well. That's how 2002 looked for us. If it drives you crazy, that's how business is. Get used to it, and you don't have to do all of it, but there you go. I thought I'd put that in just so you know. Thank you, and we'll see you in 5000 BC. Bye-bye.